Shalom and welcome to Mama Rahel Ministries. Today we're going to be talking about this week's portion, which deals with Tzav. Actually, when we go to the book of Leviticus, we're going to be studying um, some perspective in regards to what the priesthood was supposed to be in charge of. The book of Leviticus is a very interesting book because it deals with how we approach to God. Actually, if we go to the first chapter of the book of Leviticus, it's going to tell us that God called Moses and spoke to him from the tent of assembly, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when a person from you presents an offering to God." And when we study the word here, presents, it actually means yakrib or karif, which is to come closer to God. Karif, draw near, coming near, offer, comes up, approach, present, presented. So there is a ritual or there's a protocol that somebody has to follow whenever he wants to approach God. So that's going to be our premise for this study. How do we approach to God? Is it based on a commandment? Is it based on the intention of our heart? Is it based on what we think, how we think? Or is there a protocol established by God being the authority for somebody to approach Him? The book of Leviticus, especially the chapter 10, which is part of this Torah portion this week, is going to deal with Nadab and Abihu. And we're going to study a little bit in depth into this. Let's read the first three verses of this book, of this chapter. And it says, "And Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, each took his censer and put fire in them." Look at the wording, the wording it's using. It says that they put fire in their censer and put fire in them and place incense on them. Then they presented before God in legitimate fire, which he had not commanded them. So fire went out from before God, and it consumed them so that they died before God. Therefore Moses said to Aaron, "This is what God spoke, saying, among those who are close to me, I will show myself holy, and in the presence of all the people, I will display my glory." So Aaron was silent. Now let's go to chapter 8 of this book. We're gonna go chapter 8, and we're gonna follow we're gonna follow a line with this Torah portion. In the book, in chapter 8 of this book, God actually spoke to Moses, and he is fulfilling what he promised them. He told that they were going to be his priests, and they will serve inside the tabernacle. And he told Moses how he should build the priestly garments, how he should anoint them, and what was the protocol for that. So chapter 8 is basically fulfilling that from Exodus. Remember, Exodus was the construction of the tabernacle, the material they were going to use. Chapter 40 of the book of Exodus is when God actually descends his presence over the tabernacle. Chapter 1 of Leviticus uh, opens with an invitation for the people, the Israelites, to approach to God, being there are some cultic agents established already by God, and the authority being given by God for them to work inside that sacred space. So chapter 8 is the fulfillment of that. It's the continuity of the construction of the tabernacle, and is the moment that Aaron and his sons are going to be washed with water. They are going to be anointed, and they are going to be ordained so they can start their priestly duties inside the sacred space. So they are going to be the only people with authority to work inside that and to come near the altar and do the proceedings. Like in chapter 1, it says that they are supposed to manipulate the blood. Let's go to chapter 1 really quick. It says, after the Israelite bring the offering, it says that he will present the blood. Okay, verse 5. He must slaughter the young bull before God. Then Aaron's sons, the priest, will present the blood, sprinkle the blood all around the altar that is at the door of the tent of assembly. Then he must remove the skin. So it's gonna tell you the how the protocol is supposed to work. There is some steps that need to be followed in order for that offering to be acceptable to God. Actually, when we go to the end of each segment, especially here, then he must wash the inner parts and the lower leg bones with water, and the priest shall present the whole animal and will turn it into smoke on the altar. And it is a burnt offering by fire and a pleasing fragrance to God. So basically, this offering, if they follow the step established by God, this will be a offering that is going to be acceptable for God. Um, and it's gonna say the same thing everywhere, every game. Okay, let's see here. Let's jump here. We're together. It's an offering made by fire to God. So it's gonna say everywhere that at the end of each rite, each ritual, it's gonna say that the offering is acceptable to God, or he, like here, he must turn olive fat into smoke. Verse 26 of chapter 4, like the fat of the fellowship offering sacrifice, and the priest shall make atonement for him because of his sin, and he will be forgiven. So, um, so after every offering, the action that the offerer will receive, it's being forgiven because the offering was made according to the step established by God. So there is an authority, there is authorized agents, there is some step regulations and commandments for each of the offerings and how they are supposed to be presented. So the book of Leviticus is going to establish the legality of the priestly service and also the service inside the tabernacle and later the temple. So it's very important for us to understand the temple, how it's function, based on the book of Exodus chapter 24. Sorry, chapter 25. It's verse 8 and 9, which is going to tell us the legality of the tabernacle, the construction of the tabernacle, and also the services. It says, and make a sanctuary for me, that I will dwell in the midst of them, according to all that I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its equipment, and so you will do. So when we study the pattern, it's actually the word in Hebrew. It's going to be the word tafnit, is going to be the word tafnit, which actually goes more than what really a design is for construction. It's not only the design for construction, but it also includes the utensils, the service, and the step and regulations regarding each of the services. Like if you're going to do the Yom Kippur service, there is some steps you gotta do. Actually, there is 42 steps that you gotta follow for Yom Kippur. If you will do the Tamid service, there's some steps that you have to follow. You cannot reverse these steps, because once you do that, it becomes illegitimate, not authorized by the Tafnit, not authorized by God, and so the service becomes chaos. So that's very important for us to understand before we go on to chapter 10 of the book of Leviticus. Chapter 10 is going to tell us, actually, chapter 9 is going to tell us that they started this service, right? Let me go here to chapter 9, Leviticus. It's going to tell us what happened after they were anointed and they were consecrated and they were authorized now to approach the altar. Verse 7 is going to tell us something very important. Moses said to Aaron, approach the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself and for the people, and sacrifice the people offering and make atonement for them, just as God has commanded. So if it's telling you that God has commanded, remember the book of Exodus is saying you shall build or you shall make the tabernacle. Let's go to the book of Exodus really quick again. Chapter 25. It says, and so you will do. It's using the same language, so you will do according to what he has showed them. So Leviticus here says that he shall make atonement for them just as God has commanded. Now my question to you is, where are the laws, regulations, and statutes that states the commandment or the steps that Aaron and his son have to follow? If we go to the book of Leviticus chapter 1, it's going to tell us how they should do the service. He says, okay, verse 6, then he is talking about Aaron and his sons. must remove the skin from the burnt offering and cut into pieces. The son of Aaron, the priest, will put fire on the altar and arrange the wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, will arrange the pieces of meat, the head and the suet and the wood that is on the fire that is on the altar. Then he must wash its inner parts and the lower leg bones with water, and the priest will turn into smoke the whole animal on the altar as a burnt offering by fire, as an appeasing fragrance for God. So it's telling us, the book of Leviticus, the steps that that a priest must follow in order for that offering to be acceptable by God. Okay. Now, the chapter 9 is telling of the first offering that they were putting on the altar, and it's going to tell us something interesting at the end of the chapter. It says that verse 15. Then he presented the people offering and took the goat of the sin offering, which was for the people, and he slaughtered it and offered it as a sin offering like the first one. Then he presented the burnt offering and he sacrificed it according to the regulation. According to the regulation. So there are regulations that Aaron and his sons were supposed to abide by. Then he presented the grain offering, and he filled his pan with some of it, and he turned it into smoke on the altar beside the morning burnt offering. Then he slaughtered the ox and the ram and the fellowship offering that are for the people, and Aaron's son brought the blood to him, and he sprinkled it on the altar around. As for the fat portion from the ox and from the ram, the fat tail and the layers of the fat of the kidneys in the lobe of the liver, they placed the fat portion on the breast section, and he turned the fat portion into smoke on the altar. Then Aaron waved the breast section on the right upper thigh as a wave offering before God, just as Moses had commanded. Then Aaron lifted his hand toward the people, and he blessed them, and he came down after sacrificing the sin offering and the burnt offering on the fellowship offering. Then Moses and Aaron entered the tent of assembly. When they came out, they blessed the people, and God's glory appeared to all the people. Then a fire went out from before God, and it consumed the burnt offering and the fat portions on the altar. And all the people saw it, so they shouted for joy, and they fell on their faces. So we are looking at what happened when the offering is presented in the right manner, following the steps according to regulation, like it says here, according to the regulation. So when all those regulations are followed, the response from God is the manifestation of his glory, and the fire came out from his presence and burned whatever was on the altar. Okay? Chapter 10, we will see that there is a problem. Nadab and Abihu took their censers, they put fire in them and placed incense on them, and they presented before God illegitimate fire. Now we're going to talk about this word here, Sarah, illegitimate. What Sarah means according to Bible legality. This is the word that we're going to trace and follow. Actually, it's foreign, foreigners, strange, illegitimate, anyone, strange thing, and other aliens. Now, before we start with my presentation here, with my PowerPoint, I want to talk a little bit about what is illegitimate. When we study, actually, I'm going to go on the PowerPoint into that, but I want to mention something. Everybody is a czar or is illegitimate at certain point in his life. It's something that doesn't have to deal specifically with what a cultic service does, or maybe the temple. It has to do with something that is authorized or not authorized. So everybody at one point in his life is going to be illegitimate for something. For example, the Israelite is illegitimate to enter certain spots, certain places inside the temple. You can only go to the court of the Israelites. A woman is only permitted to go to the court of the woman. If she goes further, she becomes a czar, illegitimate, not authorized. The Israelites are the same. They have a spot where they can be the court of the Israelites. Now you have the courts of the Kohanim, where they stand and they do the service. They can only go there. Non-Israelites, non-Levites can stand in the court of the Kohanim or the priest. Now you have the holy place. The holy place, you can have the people, the priests that are being have been authorized to perform the service at that point. Let's say the Tamid service, the morning service. They are authorized to do the service at that point. Somebody who has not been authorized, even though if he's a priest, he cannot go into the holy place because he don't have the authority to do so. There was an order established by God, given to Moses inside the Tafnit. Now, the most holy place, only the high priest can go one day in a year. That's the day that he has authority to go. If he goes another day, he's a czar on that day. Only the day that God has authorized him to go. So Tzav and Leviticus 10, cultic legality and holiness as a legal category. We will consider the legality, most of it obviously in regards to what a holy place is, what a sacred space is going to be. So this is a rigorous analysis of the biblical priestly system, the transgression of Nadab and Abihu, and the theological legal principle of Leviticus 10:3 from a perspective of the ancient Near East and the Hebrew ritual law. Okay, so we will consider Tzav as a system of cultic legality, definition of legality in Tzav, the transgression of Nadab and Abihu, legal nature of strange fire, Leviticus 10:3, theological legal analysis, and the canonical and comparative connection between parallels in the ancient Near East and the biblical canon and scholarly synthesis. So this is what we will try to cover today, and we will use the methodology from my teacher Rico Cortez, which is gonna embody sacred space, chaos and order, honor and shame, righteousness and justice, and covenant. Now remember that when we're talking about sacred space, every time we talk about sacred space, we need to consider what is a covenant. A covenant given to Israel, that inside that covenant, we do not only have commandment for the people, but we also have the structure of the tabernacle. We have the laws for the tabernacle. We have laws for the priests. We have laws for the Levites, and obviously we have laws for the lay person, the Israelites. There are even laws for the stranger, somebody who comes from another nation and wants to be part of Israel or want to adhere to Israel. There's laws. So we have to consider the context of the temple, something that we will consider. Context of the temple, biblical legality, and some historical or cultural context in order to understand the text a little bit better. Okay, let's proceed. So Tzav, the system of cultic legality. The portion Tzav is not merely a text of ritual instruction. It is an operational legal code for the sanctuary. I don't know if you've ever considered what is an operational code, legal code inside the sanctuary. But the Bible, the book of Leviticus, basically is that. It's like a constitution for the temple and its service. How the service will be performed, when it will be performed, who will perform it, at what time, who can approach during that time. It's basically a legal code only for the tabernacle and its services. For example, a binding normative protocol that regulates each act of sacrificial worship with technical precision. It is authority derived not from custom, but from divine commandment revealed. It's not derived from customs. And this is very important for us to consider, because sometimes when we see some commandments in the Bible, or we read some stuff, we think that the rabbis invented such stuff, and that they were inventing stuff in order for them to follow stuff. No, the Bible has its own legal code, and it doesn't derive from the customs. It derives from God as the authority and the lawgiver, who gave the law to Israel and its priests and the Levites, how they are to abide by them, in order for us, in order for God to abide and put his abode in Israel. So it's very important for us to understand the difference between what is an authority given by God and what is actually a custom that it's been followed for for generations. It's two different things. But when we're talking about biblical legality, it deals with the authority that God establishes, not a custom established by a rabbi. It's different. So the three dimensions of legality in Tzav, a procedural legality. Tzav regulates with precision which fire to use, which part of the sacrifice is burned, which part is eaten, where each action takes place, and who is authorized to perform it. It is not a normative protocol of non-discretionary compliance. So when we are reading this quick portion, we got to consider the dimension of legality in the portion of Tzav. It deals with which fire is used, how it is used, what parts are burned in the sacrifice, which parts are eaten by the priests, where they can eat those parts, and only if you consider the study of the book of Leviticus, we will only understand this if we study the temple. Based on the temple, based on its buildings, we will see where they were supposed to eat, where they put the fire, where was the different fire placed on the altar, what kind of wood they use. Remember, if they will use wood in the altar, there has to be a specific woods that they need to bring. They cannot use all kind of wood. So it has to be a law specific for the wood. And I will show you. I will show you where it says that. In the book of Leviticus, if we go to chapter 1. Wait, this is Exodus. Leviticus chapter 1. It tells us, okay, blood sprinkler. Then he must remove the skin of the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The son of Aaron will put fire on the altar and arrange the wood. So it is a commandment. Let me see here if I find the commandment. Okay, here should be the commandment in Spanish, but let's see. See, it's different kind of wood. Almond, olive, wild olive, and different kind of wood that they were supposed to use. Let me see if here's the commandment. I'm pretty sure it's here. Okay, yeah, commandment 132. The fire is supposed to be kindled on the altar continually, all the time, forever. So there is a protocol for them to follow that commandment. Have we considered the study of the fire, how they put the fire in the altar, how they keep the fire burning continually? Okay, so it says that they were supposed to arrange this. Okay, let's go here. So there is a procedure for the law, which fire, what parts are sacrificed, which parts are burned, which parts are eaten, where does this take action, and who is authorized to perform it. This is inside biblical law. Remember that law in the Bible or anywhere, you cannot usurp biblical law or legality. You cannot say, I don't like this law, I want to change the law, because you are not authorized to do that. So if the Bible establishes who is authorized to perform the services in the temple, who are we to change them? What authority do we have to change biblical legislation? Remember, the authority is only God, and only He can change. And He already established Aaron's and his sons. Jurisdictional legality. The altar and the tabernacle constitute a legal restricted space under the direct jurisdiction of God. No agent acts on their own initiative. So inside the sacred space, which is a restricted space, nobody can act on their own initiative. So if your intention of your heart is really, really good, you cannot say, I will do this based on the intention of my heart because I think this is better for God, because nobody can act on his own initiative. Already God established every action require explicit mandate. The absence of mandate is equivalent to the absence of authority. So God has already established every single bit of procedure, steps, regulations, commandments on how he wants his service to be performed. If we establish our own service, we are deviating from God established service, and therefore it becomes a strange service to God. It becomes avodah zarah, which is a strange service. So normally when we study the Bible, if we consider it idolatry. Idolatry, really, the word idolatry is kind of a little bit different than when you consider avodah zarah as a strange service to God, something that is not authorized by God. Therefore, when you do a strange service to God, it becomes something unauthorized by God and against God's authority. That's why Nadab and Abihu, they die because what they were doing goes directly against God authority established already on how the service is supposed to be performed. So, continuity of legality. The continuous fire and the continuous sacrifice express that the system does not admit interruptions or alteration. It is a permanent normative order. Its interruption constitutes a legal violation, not merely a ritual one. So, the interruption becomes something that is a violation of what God has appointed. What is legality in context of Tzav? It's not modern moral law. Legality in Tzav does not correspond to contemporary normative ethics or to principles of individual morality. It is not a matter of subjective virtue or pious intention. So very important for us. It is not a matter of subjective virtue or somebody who thinks that something might be wrong and it's better to do this way because it's better or it will please God in a better way. No, it's based on what God has established. It's conformity to the revealed pattern. It is conformity to the revealed pattern. Remember, I talked to you in the beginning about what the tafnit is. God's established order. So, legality is defined as exact conformity to the tafnit, the divinely revealed pattern or model it implies. So, the Bible requires us to conform to whatever the legal status is. So let's say if we're talking about the tabernacle or the temple, we need to find out what the laws are for us to abide by them, and in order for us to not incur in usurp somebody else's role and function. The Bible established rules for keeping the sacred spaces, like what is a sacred time, a feast. And I can show you, let's go to the book of Numbers, chapter 28, which we will see that each of the days of the festive days or the holy convocations are under what is a sacred space legality and deals with the temple. If we go to chapter 28, it says, God spoke to Moses, saying, command Israel, and said to them, you will be careful to present my offering, my food, of my offerings made by fire, of a fragrance, of a pleasing to me at its appointed time. So there is appointed time. It's ruled by the tabernacle, by the temple. God established the law, the appointed time. Let me say something here. And they're supposed to abide by them. Okay. But I had this in English, but no. Okay. So God established some appointed time, and Aaron and his sons are supposed to abide by the appointed times, and also the Israelites, because it says, command the Israelites to say to them, you will be careful to present my offering. Okay, now if we go to every offering, let's say at the beginning of each of your month, you will present a burnt offering to God. If we go to on the day of first fruits, you are to present a new offering to God during the festival of weeks. On the seventh month of the first day of the month, you will have a holy convocation. You will not do regular work. It will be a day for blowing trumpets. You will offer burnt offering. So all the festival, all the holy convocations are under the tabernacle or the temple, and the legality then have to apply to those. We cannot just say, okay, I will change the day, I will go and meet God. Because remember that there is an offering for you to present yourself to God, because the Bible says, do not present to God with empty handed. So you have to bring an offering to God. Now, it is very important for us to understand, because if God has appointed times for you to be seen by Him, then can we change the days based on our intention, based on what is a subjective virtue or a pious intention? Remember, there is a legality, and it says that the legality defines the exact conformity to the tafnit, the divinely revealed pattern or model, and it implies ritual precision in every technical detail. So it means that it has to be at the appointed time. It has to be at the right moment. It has to be by the right steps performed by Aaron and his sons. It has to be presented the way that God has told them to do. Technical obedience to the specific command. Absolute prohibition of unsanctioned innovation. So nobody can innovate or nobody can do something based on their criteria. It has to be based on the obedience to the specific commandment that God had already established in the book of Leviticus and his commandments for the people to follow. So that's the problem when we see the book of Leviticus chapter 10. That's going to be the problem with Nadab and Abihu. Leviticus 10:1 records with terminology precision they offer before God strange fire that he had never commanded them to do so. So the problem is that they are offering something that God has never asked them to do. It doesn't comply with the steps and commandments that God gave them. The gravity of the act does not lie in the lack of religious sincerity or in an emotional mistake, but in a violation of jurisdiction within the most restricted space of the biblical universe. The problem is structural and legal, not psychological. So the problem when they offer this fire, strange fire, is not that their intention, which might be the best intention, but it does not conform to the obedience to the commandment that God has established how somebody comes near. Remember, when we study the Levites and the Kohanim, there is places where they can approach, and there are specific times when they can approach, especially the priest. If you have the service, the Tamid service, you have some priests that they are chosen by lottery how and who is supposed to present the offerings in the altar, who's supposed to do the incense, who's supposed to clean the altar from the fire and all that stuff, who's supposed to prepare the wood. There is a steps and protocol. Not somebody can wake up in the morning and say, I feel like I want to present the offering this today, or I want to do the incense today. No, there were steps they were supposed to follow for everybody working inside the sacred space in order to maintain the order established by God according to the Tafnit. So, what is a strange fire? Based on the book of Leviticus. The adjective Sarah means strange, foreign, unauthorized in the priestly legal lexicon. This term designates what does not belong to the assigned sphere or role. Very important. This term designates what does not belong to the assigned sphere or role. So if somebody wakes up in the morning and he says, okay, I want to do the incense today. Is that his role? Has he been assigned to that sphere? That's the question we have to ask. What are we doing in our service to God? Have we been assigned to that role? Do we have authority, or have we been designated to that sphere? Or are we acting in a role that we have not been authorized or assigned? You can have the best intention of your heart. Remember, Nadab and Abihu, they probably had the best intention, but they were acting outside the sphere and role at that moment. It is not simply different, it's functional illegitimate within the context in which it's introduced. Legal implication. Use of an element outside legal specification. It can be an object, it can be a person. Introduction of something not sanctioned by divine law. Introduction of something that the law does not provide a sanction for. Let's say, right now, the probably um, there is something that does not regulate something that we do, but you cannot introduce that to the temple because there is no command for that to be introduced into the temple. Action outside the parameter of explicit command, contamination of the sacred jurisdiction or space. So this is basically what Sarah means: something illegitimate, something that has not been introduced authorized for that moment, that place, or probably for that person. It can be a person, it can be an object. Let's say you want to introduce into a service in the temple. Let's say you have a knife and you want to introduce another knife that has not been consecrated, that has not been separated for that purpose. That knife becomes sarah, becomes something unauthorized, something illegitimate for the priest to do the shechita, or to cut the animal, because it has not been separated. It's something that is common. So there's not a sanction for that inside the law, but that action of bringing something that has not been authorized causes a big problem inside the temple. It causes a chaos because it has not been authorized to use for that use. Thematic field of Sarah: strange, foreign, alien, not belonging. But the Leviticus at number 8 acquire a technical sense, that which is outside its assigned legal category. In the priestly system, Sarah does not describe essence, but legal status. So Sarah is a legal status that is given to something, to an object, a person, or something. Like I said in the beginning, there is a sarah on everybody's sarah at a certain point. A stranger cannot go inside the courts of the Israelites because there is something outside. There is a sign that is telling them that they cannot cross over there. Only they can cross on the penalty of death. So they are sarah. They are a sar. They are a stranger to that location. Somebody who a woman from the court of the woman, she cannot go into the court of Israel. She becomes a czar, a stranger, and so forth. So it's described not the essence, but the legal status. The Kohanim, they have a legal status that they can go into the court of the priest. That's their legal status. They are not a czar, they are not a stranger, they are not a foreign inside their court. But a Levite is a foreign in the court of the priest because they have not been authorized to be in that domain. So what is Sarah or a Sar is something is not the Sar by nature, but because it lacks authorization within that domain. Very important for us to understand. If we understand this word Sar or Sarah, we will understand why not everybody can be a priest, why not everybody can be a Levite, why Israel has a function, the Levite has a function and a role and a purpose, and these priests have a role, function, and purpose, and the high priest have a role, function, and purpose that not a priest can accomplish, that not a Levite can accomplish, that an Israelite cannot accomplish. Everybody is important. Everybody has his role, function, and purpose inside the kingdom of God. When we try to do something that we lack authorization to do so, then we are causing a problem. If we go here back to this, we are causing a problem because we are trying to do something that we have not been authorized, uh, bringing chaos, and by bringing that chaos and removing the order from that place, it's considered rebellion, and the consequence of that rebellion is death and exile. That's why when we read the book of Kings and the Ephraimites, they try to do that. It's already been in the Bible. It's already in the Bible. They establish their own uh, priesthood. They establish their own place of worship. They change the feast. what they were doing is it lacks authorization within that domain. They were not authorized to change the feast. They were not authorized to change the priesthood. They were not authorized to build a temple. They were not authorized to build an altar. They were not authorized to do worship outside from Jerusalem, because the place where God put his name, where he established his name forever, was in Jerusalem and not in Bethel or Tel Dan. So it's very important for us to understand what really a SAR means for us. And it's not just any word, it's something inside the Bible law that we have to consider. When we follow and when we stay within our domain, blessings flow, and then the kingdom of God grows. But when somebody tries uh, to do something that is not within his domain, then there is problem, not only for him, but for all the collective people. The term Sar or Sarah carries specific legal technical weight within the priestly corpus, defining that which is outside its assigned legal category rather than simply being foreign or different. For example, Numbers 151, Sar, in person, function outsider. The phrase, the outsider, Sar, who draw near shall die. That's what number 151 says. Makes clear that outsider here does not mean an ethnic foreigner. So it doesn't mean somebody who is foreign from the Israelites. It's an Israelite can be it's a foreigner in regards to the Levites' duties. Instead, it denotes an unauthorized person, anyone who is not designated priest or Levite who intrudes into sacred function. So the Bible does define us what a Sar means. It says that it's not somebody, it's not a Gentile or somebody from another nation. Obviously, he's a Sar already, but it's somebody inside the Israelites who is not designated priest or Levite, yet he wants to intrude into sacred function and want to do sacred functions, and he has not been authorized. We have the perfect example. I think it was King Uzzah who wanted to do the service in the temple, and he got leper because he was not authorized. He's a Tsar. He's a stranger. We also have the example when I think it was Paul, when he came and he brought with him some people. They thought that they were uncircumcised, that they were Gentiles, strangers, and they closed the Temple Mount because to them they thought that he had introduced Gentiles or stranger into the temple courts. So Leviticus 10:1, H. Sarah, unauthorized fire. The strange fire was not necessarily pagan or impure. Its illegitimacy came from being not authorized by the system prescribed by God for cultic offerings, thereby violating sanctuary precise procedural law. Exodus 39, Ketorek Sarah, unauthorized incense. The prohibition against offering strange incense refers especially to incense that does not conform to the formula and preparation method prescribed by God. Any deviation made it strange and unacceptable. That's why in the book of Numbers, I believe it's chapter 16, when the Korach and the 250 people who came and presented incense, it was a strange fire because the incense was not authorized and they were not authorized to present the incense. So if we see biblical law, we will see that every time somebody tried to usurp or somebody tried to do something that is not within his domain, he has not been authorized, there is divine judgment because he is usurping a position that is not made for him, that he has not been authorized. Therefore, causing a contamination or a pollution inside the sacred space. And remember that pollution and God cannot abide together. There has to be a separation because God is holy. So if somebody penetrates into the sacred space, polluting it, it's a serious problem because it threatens with the presence of God leaving the temple because it's not how do I say, it's not proper for him, it's not up to standards for him to be in that place because It's not impurity. That's why when there was idolatry in the temple, God abandoned the temple. That's why when the people of Israel commit a operation, or when they do injustice, God's presence leave because he cannot be in a place that has been polluted by the children of Israel. So, okay, let's continue here. Legal typology of the offense. Within the framework Tzav, the validity of an act is not based on the intrinsic nature of the object or person, but on its legal status and conformity with the divine command. The distinction is fundamental for understanding the regulation of Nadab and Abihu. Holy, designated and set apart by God for a specific purpose. There's stuff in the Bible that God has designated as holy. The people of Israel, holy people. Now, we have to consider and we have to ask the question, what is the role, function, and purpose? What's the role, function, and purpose of Israel? The priests have been separated and they have been consecrated to God for a specific function, purpose, and with a role. The land of Israel is being consecrated. It's holy. It has a function, a purpose, and a role. The holy, the uh, the priest, the high priest, he's considered holy. What's his purpose, role, and function? He represents all of Israel. That's why he's considered holy. That's the only person in the Bible that is considered holy. Uh, so we have to ask the question, holy, something that is being designated and set apart by God for a specific purpose. What's your purpose? If you have been set apart by God, what's your role? What's your function? What's your purpose inside the kingdom of God? Why has God looked upon you and separated you from all the nations? It's not what the Bible says. You are have separated you from all the nations, but they have a role, purpose, and function. What's your role, function, and purpose? Why have you been inherited into the people of Israel? For what? Common, not designated by God, for sacred purpose, for general use. So something common is something that God has not designated for a sacred purpose. It's something for general use. Sar is any element or person in operating outside the role or permitted use established by divine statutes in sacred context. So Sar is not something impure, it's something illegal in the cultic sphere, not necessarily contaminated in a broad ritual sense. So a Sar is not something that is contaminated. Now let's consider Nadab and Abihu. Both of them, they were consecrated. Remember, they went through some ritual procedures and they were pure. So what they introduced, the strange fire, is not something that is coming from something contaminated or impure. It's just something that is not authorized by God. It doesn't follow the procedures and the steps established by God inside his holy space, inside his temple. My question to you is this. If we have been inherited into the people of Israel, if we are part of his kingdom, are we doing stuff that is considered sar? Are we introducing stuff inside the kingdom of God that God has not authorized, that God has not designated, that God has not established? Are we changing his commandment? Are we changing his feast? Are we changing his calendar? Are we changing his people? Are we changing what he called holy, the priesthood, the land, and his people? Are we changing those stuff? Remember, it's a great privilege that God has extended to humanity to be inherited into the people of Israel, to be part of his kingdom. For with what purpose? What's our role, function, and what's our role, function, and purpose? To change, to become a czar? Remember, czar is illegal in the cultic sphere, not necessarily contaminated in a broader sense. Okay, it's an element or person operating outside the role permitted, used, established by divine statute in sacred context. Okay, holiness equals divinely defined order. So holiness is going to be defined by order. How do we know something is holy and something is not holy? Now we have to consider biblical law to what is considered holy based on the biblical law. So if holiness equals divinely defined order, then we have to consider God's commandment. God's commandment is going to establish what is holy, how we have to behave, what we have to do. It's like when you come before God, there is an offering. Yeah, you have to bring an offering before God to be seen. It says you cannot come with empty hand. So if you're coming before God and you come empty handed, are you going to be seen by God? Because you are not following the steps defined divinely by God for you to be seen. Violation of that order established by God, so in other words, violation of the commandments or the step that God has established becomes a SAR. So if you are changing the commandment established by God, you are becoming a SAR. You're becoming somebody unauthorized. You are acting with a high hand against God's commandments. And remember that when you um, do something high-handed against God's authority, the consequence for that is death. We will see in Nadab and Abihu. We will see in the book of Numbers, somebody who acts with high-handed against the authority. It can be God, or it can also be the authority of that God has established. At that point, it can be the high priest, it can be the priest, it can be the Levites, it can be the court of Israel, the Sanhedrin. So holiness is defined by divine order. Violation of that order becomes SAR. Legal typology of defense, usurpation of authority. They acted without mandate and outside the revealed procedure. In public law, an action carried out without normative authorization is null and void. Usurpation of competence is not cured by the dignity of the actor. So the dignity of the good act or the intention of the heart of that person does not nullify the consequence or does not nullify the act as usurpation. Let me repeat that. A good character person, good intentions of the heart of one person does not nullify the consequence or divine judgment of somebody who has usurped so, another something that he's not supposed to. Let me put you an example. In the first century, we understand if when we study history from the first century and especially from the temple, we will see that there was corruption within some of the priestly circles. Not all of them were corrupt, but some of them were corrupt. We will see Ananias and Ananias and Caiaphas, and we will see other that were corrupt. This is something that is in history. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody, an Israelite or a Levite, who saw that they were corrupt and his good intention of the heart was to do the right way, the right manner as God has prescribed inside the scriptures by biblical law, that a Levite can go and remove that priest who is corrupt and put himself in that location, because that he becomes now a czar. He becomes somebody unauthorized to do this service. So the priest might be corrupt, but you cannot do by your intention of your heart and try to do it the best way, even though you are trying to do the best way for God and trying to abide by the commandment, and you can do everything perfect by the commandment, but God did not authorize you, or God did not authorize the Levite to do the service from the priest. The priest is going to carry his own iniquity. When we go to the book of Numbers, chapter 18, Numbers chapter 18, it says, God spoke to Aaron, said to Aaron, you, your sons, and your family, with you will bear the guilt of the sanctuary, and you and your son with you will bear the guilt of your priesthood. So they are responsible, the Aaron and his sons, they are responsible for what they do inside the altar. Verse 7, but you with your son will keep your priesthood to perform your priestly duties for everything at the altar and for the area behind the curtains. I give you the priesthood as a gift, but the stranger who approach will be put to death. So they are responsible for the way how they handle themselves inside the sacred space. they will bear the iniquity. If somebody, a Levite, see a corrupt priest, he cannot usurp and try to do according to the best of his heart, because that's not his position. Also, when we go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 4, let me see if I'm right. Chapter 4, it should be chapter 4. Let's go here to chapter 4. It says, God spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Israelites, saying, if a person sins by unintentional wrong from any of God's commands, that should be violated, and he violates any of them. If the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, then concerning that sin that he has committed, he shall bring a young bull without defect for God as a sin offering. He shall bring the bull to the tent of assembly at the entrance before God, place his hand on the bull's head, and slaughter the bull before God. The anointed priest shall take some of the bull blood and shall bring it to the tent of assembly, and the priest shall dip his finger on the blood and shall spatter some of the blood 7 times before God in front of the sanctuary curtain. The priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrance incense before God, which is at the tent of assembly, and the rest of the bull's blood he must pour out of the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the entrance of the tent of assembly. Okay, he must remove all the fat from the bull of the sin offering, the fat that covers the inner parts. Okay, let's jump here a little bit. Okay, here. But the bull skin and its meat, additional to his head, its lower leg, bones, inner parts, and all the offal, he shall carry all of the bull outside the camp to ceremonial clean place, to the fattest ashes dump. And he shall burn it in a woody fire. He must be burned up in the fattest ashes dump. So if the priest they commit a transgression, they have to bring this bull. If Israel or the assembly did wrong unintentionally and the matter was conceived from the assembly eyes, and they acted against any of God's commandments that should not be violated, so that they incur guilt. So now it's talking about the congregation. Israel committed a mistake, and that being said, the authority for Israel at that point is the Sanhedrin. They made a mistake. They did a ruling that caused all of Israel to commit an unintentional wrongdoing. They shall bring, uh, okay, it was concealed, see? It was concealed from the assembly size, and they acted against any of God's commandments that should not be violated. So that they incur guilt. When the sins and they have committed against the command becomes known, the assembly shall present a young bull, a sin offering, and they shall bring it before the assembly, the tent of assembly. Okay, the elders of the community shall place their hand on the bull's head before God, and he shall slaughter the bull before God. Okay, so we find this. Let's see. So they shall bring that outside the camp as well. And it says here, he must turn the fat into smoke on the altar like the fat of the fellowship offering sacrifice, and the priest shall make atonement for him, atonement kippur, for him because he sins, and he will be forgiven. So it's talking about the leaders and the people. And then it talks about the people, right? If somebody individual makes something unintentional. So now it's telling us that there was an offering if they made a mistake. So what does this have to do with our study? God established authority with the priest, established authority. Israel has an authority, the priest has authority, the Beit Din or the Sanhedrin have an authority. So what do we have to do? Changing like a calendar, the feast, the appointed times, when it has already been established by God, and it is supposed to be declared, and there were supposed to be put offerings on the altar. So the last Sanhedrin, they already had established and consecrated all the festive days uh, according to the calculation that they follow in the temple before they already established this. So it has the legality. Nobody can change it today. If somebody tries to change it, they are doing what is usurpation of authority. They are usurpation, they are law action carried out without normative authorization is null and void. Usurpation of competence is not cured by dignity of the actor. So if you said, no, I saw the moon, and according to the last calendar that was established by the Sanhedrin, it doesn't line up with what they established, they still bear the iniquity. Remember, they are supposed to bring an offering, but there is no Sanhedrin right now. So when the new Sanhedrin is, when they establish a new Sanhedrin, they have to bring this and say, we made a mistake. And this is the mistake we made. And they have to proclaim to all the nation, this is a mistake. You have to follow this ruling. But until then, we have a ruling already. So when the appointed times are, what are the dates? What's the appointed moment? When are the new months? We already have that established by the last Sanhedrin. So if we deviate from that, we're doing usurpation, and it doesn't matter if your intention is good or is the best. Like I say, in the first century, if a Levite saw the 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 priest that he was doing wrong, he was corrupt, the Levite or the Israelite cannot say, my intention of my heart is to do it the best way, is to do according to biblical law, is to do according to the step that God established. I'm gonna remove the priest from his location, and I'm gonna put myself in his location, and I'm gonna do because my intention of my heart is the best. And God will be, no, it doesn't work like that. It works based on legality and authority. They added an element not foreseen by the normative system. In Hebrew cultic law, innovation in the sacred realm is not creative, it is transgression, expressly prohibited in Deuteronomy 12:32. And when we study Deuteronomy, let's go there really quick. Deuteronomy 12:32. It's actually speaking in the context of idolatry. It says, but think about it for a minute. It's talking about the context of idolatry, but it says, all the things, all of the things that I am commanding you, you must diligently observe. You shall not add to it, and you shall not take away from it. So now, what's the importance in this verse here? I'm gonna here put in yellow. What's the importance of this verse here? When we study the temple, there is a contrast within the ancient Near East, how they practice the underworld and how they sacrifice animals to the underworld and the temple. It's a big contrast. That's why the people of Israel cannot change, the priests cannot change the service in the temple. Because if they change something, the people around them will think that they are manipulating the God, that they are doing something to the underworld. That's why you have laws and regulations protecting not only the priest, but the honor of the priest, the honor of the Israelite woman, because in ancient Near World they practiced what was fertility rituals. So by the woman from the Israelites being exempt from going into the near the altar or the priestly courts or where the Israelites were, everybody understood that they were not practicing fertility rituals. So anything that had to do with the ancient world, manipulation or divinity or rituals that connected with the ancient world, the temple had nothing to do with it. It's a contrast inside the temple. So by Nadab and Abihu bringing in something that actually was not authorized by God, it can be seen by a manipulation of God. That's why it's become SAR, something illegitimate to the to the uh, to the temple service. So, transgression is expressly prohibited. Violation of holiness. So that's why it's important, this verse here. You shall not add, you must observe diligently what I'm commanding you. You shall not add to it, and you shall not take away from it. And the interesting that is talking um, in the context of idolatry. Let me see here something. Uh, it says you're not allowed to eat. Let me see something. The third stipulation, purity and unity. Stalking what happened to see you place. Okay, take care for yourself so that you do not offer your burnt offering just any place that you happen to see, but only the place that God will choose among one of your tribes. Remember, the Canaanites, they choose a place and they do worship there, anywhere they could. You shall offer your burnt offerings, and there you shall do all the things that I am commanding you. But whenever you desire, you may slaughter and you may eat meat according to the blessing of God. Okay. Um, When God enlarge your territory, just as He has promised to you, and you say, I want to eat some meat because you want it, whenever you desire, you may eat the meat. Okay. Only be sure not to eat the blood, because the blood is the life, and you shall not eat life with the meat. You shall not eat, but on the ground you shall pour it like water. Um, you shall not eat it, so that it will go well for you and your children after you, because then you will be doing what is right. You will be doing what is right. Okay. You will then, okay, let me read this again. You shall not eat it, so that it will go well for you and your children after you, because then you will be doing what is right in the eyes of God. Only your holy the objects that are from your votive gift you must carry, and you must bring to the place God will choose. Okay. Whenever God, be careful to obey all these things that I'm commanding you, so that it will go well for you and your children after you forever. Because then you will be doing what is good and right in the eyes of the Lord your God. When your Lord your God has cut off the nation whom you are about to go to dispose them before you, and you have disposed them, and you live in the land, take care so that you are not a snare into imitating them. See, this is the problem. Take care that you are not a snare to imitate them after they're being destroyed from before you. And so that you not inquire concerning their gods, saying, how did this nation serve their gods? And thus I myself want to do so. So you must not do this to the Lord your God. So it's talking in regards to how they're supposed to behave, and that they're not supposed to do the same things that they did the Canaanites. So the temple has a contrast between the Canaanites, the culture around Israel, and how you're supposed to do this stuff. So that way, you don't violate the code of holiness. They introduce common into holy. This is the most serious category in the Levitical purity system, the ontological contamination of the sacred consecrated space. So legal comparison. Fire used in the book of the portion Tzav from the perpetual altar authorized Nadab and Abihu fire of unspecified origin. So that's why it becomes a SAR, because the origin is not that one that got established. Nature of the action, explicitly commanded, not commanded by God. Role of the agent, regulated and delimited, self-initiated with authorization. Divine response, acceptance of worship by Aaron and his son in the right way. Immediate judgment, Leviticus 10:2. Basic conformity to the Tafnit. So when God, Aaron and his son did it, they did according to the Tafnit. That's why fire came out from God's presence and consumed. Unsanctioned, human initiative. Obedience defines the validity of the act, not the intention. This word is a very interesting, this phrase. Obedience defines the validity of the act, not the intention. So we have to clean ourselves a little bit from what the intention is. Sometimes we think intention, um, sometimes we believe the intention is very important. No, in the Bible and biblical law, obedience goes over everything. Obedience is the most important. It's the core element of our way of walk. It's not by intention. We don't walk by how we think, how our heart desires, or what our heart thinks is the best. We walk by obedience. In the priestly legal system, the agent's subjective intention is not the determining factor for cultic validity. What validates or invalidates the act is its objective conformity to the revealed divine command. This principle radically distinguishes Hebrew cultic law from all modern intention-based ethics. Absolute ritual precision in the ancient Near East. The rigor of the Israelite priestly system is not isolated phenomenon. The text in ancient Near shows that the exact ritual precision was an universal requirement in the cultic system of the Near East. An incorrect ritual was no minor accident. It invalidates the entire process and incurs divine wrath, the cosmic consequence for the temple and the community. So, if the ancient world it was so important to be precise with the service, how much important it would be in the temple of the real God, the God who really made the heaven and the earth, the God of the cosmos, the God, the sovereign God. It was so important that the intention, the obedience, and everything had to be in the right place in the right moment by abiding by the right commandment in order for it to be acceptable to God. Did you notice in the book of Leviticus when you read, especially in Leviticus 1 through 4 or 1 through 7, that every time the priests do certain steps, the people of Israel, they bring their offering, they follow the steps, the priest follow his steps, and then it says that they will be forgiven. So it culminates the right steps, the obedience and the offering in the right place, right moment, by the right agents and everything. It will culminate in God extending forgiveness. Although if it's done in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong persons, it's not going to extend forgiveness. It's going to actually uh, cause cause a problem in the okay. So ancient Near East parallels. Etude manuals from the 14th, 13th century BC requires exact sequence and specific materials in every rite. The procedure error was not correctable. It was a cosmic failure that demanded expiatory rites and a complete repetition of the process. Precision was not optional but structurally necessary. In Babylonian literary texts, cultic error generated temple contamination affecting the entire community. Priest scribes had to memorize and perform rituals with absolute precision. Innovation or unauthorized substitution was conceptually unthinkable within the system. So in the ancient world, they believed that somebody who was not authorized, well, they could not think about it. They and some of the rituals they had to memorize. The ritual of Yom Kippur, 42 steps. The high priest had to memorize and follow them, each of them, by the letter. He cannot make a mistake because this ritual was in order to remove the impurity from the temple, from the tabernacle, and in order to maintain God's presence in the tabernacle or later the temple. So it has to do with precise. It has to do with precise uh, uh, patterns or sequence, specific and complete the process according to the law established in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 10:3, this is what God spoke, saying, among those who approach me, I will be sanctified. In the presence of all the people, I will be glorified. This verse, pronounced immediately after the death of Nadab and Abihu, constituted the logical axiom and undergirds the entire priestly system. Its semantic density requires careful analysis of each linguistic component and its legal implication. Analysis of the birth graph, those who draw near. The birth graph in the Levitical corpus does not denote simply physical movement of approach. It is technical language of cultic access. It designates legal proximity to divine space. So this is very important for us to understand because the book of Leviticus opens with that. The book of Exodus, chapter 40, it closes the book with the presence of God upon the tabernacle. Now, it's very interesting that Moses could not approach, Aaron could not approach because God's glory was on it. The same thing will happen when Solomon finished the temple and he made the dedicatory that the glory of God came, but nobody could approach. Leviticus opened the book with with the privilege that God gives the Israelites to come near, to draw near, the word to korah, to draw near to the sacred space. Now, this is a technical language, but also it carries a lot of law, how you approach God. If we go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 1, let's go here really quick. It says, this, uh, I'm in the wrong book, Leviticus, chapter 1. It says, God called Moses and spoke to him from the tent of assembly, saying, speak to Israelites and said to them, when a person from you presents, which is the word karif, come near, an offering to God, the offering will be a korban, you shall present your offering from domestic animal, from cattle, or from the flock. So it's establishing the way how you approach. You cannot approach to God with an empty hand. When you offer to God, when you want to come near to God, you have to bring an offering. The offering from the animals, or from the cattle, or from the flock. So it's establishing the way we approach God. It's not my best intention from my heart to approach to God. No, God established a pattern. God established laws that regulate how we approach to God and the manner that we come near to what is a proximity, as it is said. It designates legal proximity to the divine space, the act of appearing before God within the sanctuary jurisdictional system. So it deals with the jurisdiction and how we approach that place. Implication for the priesthood. The priests are not privileged in the modern sense of term. By virtue of the verb karaf, they are the agents most exposed to divine judgment. Their closeness to the sacred space does not grant immunity. It multiplies responsibility. Greater proximity means greater ontological risk. So a lot of people wants to be a priest. Becoming a priest, by Aaron and his son becoming priests, they have more responsibility. God established them in a or put them in a place of honor, yes, yet it has to come with responsibility. So if we become closer to God, it actually teaches us that if we want to draw nearer to God, it will come with more responsibility. That's how we understand when we study the circumcision and Pesach. If somebody want to do Pesach, which is a meal of covenant renovation, you have to have major responsibility. You have to want to become part of the people. That's why in the book of Exodus it says if somebody, I think it's chapter 12, 42, 43, somewhere over there, it says if somebody, a stranger, wants to eat the Korban Pesach, he has to circumcise himself and then he becomes one like the people of Israel. So he becomes part of the people because he has major responsibility. So the priestly caste in the Israelites in the nation of Israel, they not only have the honor to be the priest, but they have major responsibility, and also a big responsibility of that is their responsibility to carry their iniquity according to the book of Numbers chapter 18. They bear the iniquity of their priesthood. God says to Aaron, you and your son, your family with you will bear, will carry. Actually the word for bear is nasa. Nasa, carry, lift the guilt of the sanctuary, and you and your son with you will bear the guilt of your priesthood. So this is a very big responsibility. So if somebody comes, a stranger approaches, they are supposed to put him to death. They are supposed to guard the tabernacle and later the temple from anybody who is a stranger, and they have to keep the purity inside the tabernacle so that the presence of God might abide in the tabernacle forever. That's their responsibility. Everybody wants to be a priest today. Why don't you start studying the laws pertaining to the priesthood? So I will be sanctified. What it does not mean? The verb does not imply that God acquires a greater degree of holiness as a result of the act. God does not become holier through human action. Interpreting the nifal is the way to study the word. In that sense, would be theologically erroneous and linguistically untenable. What it does mean, public manifestation, in the reflect tolerative nifal, kadosh indicates that God manifests himself as holy. His holiness is publicly vindicated. It is a judicial theophany. God demonstrates the reality of his holiness through the response to the cultic act, whether acceptance or judgment. So God's honor will be manifested, his glory, either through acceptance, like in the chapter 19 of Leviticus, or through judgment in the book of Leviticus chapter 10. Holiness is vindicated through two complementary paths, through correct obedience, acceptance of the cult, and through transgression, immediate judgment. So there is two ways that holiness is vindicated. One of them is through the acceptance of the cult and by obedience, following the commandments. The other one is through transgression, establishing our own way of cultic laws and changing the laws that God established, establishing our own, like the Ephraimites did in the northern kingdom. They established their own feast, they established their own priesthood, they established their own place of court, they changed the temple from Jerusalem to Tel Dan and Bethel, and they established their own priesthood. They established their own calendar. So that's what's considered transgression, and the consequence of that is immediate judgment. That's why the northern kingdom, the Ephraimites, they went into the diaspora. They were exiled because that was the response and the vindication of God's holiness through what they were doing that actually was bringing um, shame upon God's name. So both respond are manifestation of the same principle of holiness as an active juridically operatory category. Holiness as a category of ontological risk. Kadosh in the biblical world. Biblical holiness is not primarily an ethical or moral category in the priestly system. Kadosh implies separation, radical distinction from common space, ontological intent, a reality of a higher order, potential danger for those who approach incorrectly. Okay, so the scale of priestly responsibility. The people of Israel, minimum risk, obedience to the status, mediation, participation. Levites, elevated risk, service of the sanctuary, no access to sacred utensils. The priest, high risk, absolute precision in every act, direct proximity to the altar. High priest, maximum risk, total representation of Israel, access to the qodesh, kodashim. That's why he's called holy, because he represents all of Israel. The principle of Leviticus 10:3 established the axiom. Greater closeness to the sacred space implies greater responsibility and greater exposure to divine judgment. The priestly hierarchy is simultaneous a hierarchy of risk. My question to you, what have we done that God has selected us from all nations, from all tribes, from all languages, and he has approached us to his sacred space? Not as Levites, not as priests, but as part of the people of Israel. What is our role, our function, and our purpose inside his kingdom? To serve and try to be a high priest or be a priest, or to show the world that our God is holy. My king is good. My king has justice. My king is willing to have to accept you and bring you near to him if you are willing to follow the commandments, if you are willing to follow the stipulation that he has established, if you are willing to come close to him based on the standards that God has established, not on my intention of my heart, but on what he has established. Closer to God, near a greater closer to the sacred space implies greater responsibility. I will be glorified. Glory to invisibility. The term kabod literally denotes weight substance in the theophanic context. Its public manifestation communicates to the people that the reality of God is neither symbolic nor arbitrary. The cultic system is functional real. It's not manipulable. God cannot be manipulated. And establishes the pedagogical character. The death of Nadab and Abihu and Moses' declaration have an institutional pedagogical function. They establish sacred jurisprudence for all future priesthood. They are the founding presidents of the system. So what does it mean to be regarded as holy? Leviticus 10:3 articulates three theological principles of fundamental scope: the structure, the entire relationship between the human and divine in the priestly corpus. These principles are juridical, ontological in character, normally spiritual or devotional, and define the terms of legitimate access to sacred space. Let's go into this. Three principles of divine access. God. A. God defined the terms of access. The terms of approach to God are neither negotiable nor modifiable by human initiative. Very, very important. If we understand this concept, that the way we approach God is non-negotiable. God established the way how we approach to Him. It's not by human initiative. Remember that in the ancient world, the initiative was by humans to do the sacrifices, to manipulate the God. The book of Leviticus is establishes that it's not something that human beings have done. God decided to put His presence in the midst of His people. God decided. God told them, build me a tabernacle. It's not the people decided to build Him a tabernacle. God says, build me a tabernacle so that I may dwell within you. So it's God's initiative, not the initiative of woman, of human. There is no room for unsanctioned creativity or ritual innovation outside the explicit mandate. The system is heteronormative. Its norm comes exclusive from divine relation. Closeness is not informal, contrary to modern conception of spiritual intimacy. Proximity to God is the priestly, in the priestly system does not allow irreverent familiarity. Accumulated closeness does not generate flexibility in protocol. So if you are closer to God, it does not allow you to change the protocol. If the priesthood are not allowed to change the protocol, the Israelites cannot change how they come close to God. It has to be followed by the protocol established by God. Accumulated closeness does not generate flexibility in protocol. It generates greater demand. So instead of changing the protocol, it actually generates a greater responsibility from those who are closer to God. It generates greater demand. Intimacy does not equal irreverent familiarity. So it doesn't mean that because they are closer to God, they can change the protocol or they can do by the intention of their heart. No, it actually generates greater demand, greater responsibility. Holiness requires correspondence. Whoever approach must reflect divine order. Very important. Whoever approach God, he must reflect divine order and operate within the established limit. Correspondence is not merely formal, it is ontological. The cultic agent must align their action with the revealed pattern for the act to be valid before God. So if somebody is a priesthood, is doing something outside what God has established, it invalidates the ritual. If somebody changed the protocol established by God, it invalidates the ritual. It actually invalidates what he's doing, and it causes a chaos inside the sacred space, and there must be a response to that, either obedience or transgression. In the case of Nadab and Abihu, the response was death, because they were doing something that was outside what God has authorized. This is very important for us to understand, especially nowadays when people are changing the calendars, when people are changing the feasts, when people are changing the holy things, the priesthood, when people disregard the land, when people disregard the holy temple. It's very important for us to understand where we stand. What's our loyalty to God? What do we need to do in order to stand up and say, no, this is not what God has authorized. This is what God has authorized, what God allowed. Remember what happened to Nadab and Abihu when they tried to do something according to their own will. Remember what happened when Korah, he stand up against the Aaron and the system of the tabernacle, and they wanted to have the honor to be high priest. They wanted to take the position of Moses. And what happened to them when they brought strange incense? We have to transmit this to our generations, that God is a God of order. It's not just coming close to Him. It's not a privilege to come close to Him. It's the privilege to come to Him. Therefore, we need to abide by the commandment that He has established. We have to abide by how He established for us to come near to Him. The moment, the exact time, establish the sacred space, and the appointed time that have been appointed by Him. Holiness requires correspondence. Okay, we read this already. Let's go here. Let me see here. Actually, okay, let's go here. God does not adapt to human approach. the human must align with God's order. This formulation constitutes the normative synthesis of Leviticus 10:3 and the priestly system as a whole. It radically inverts uh, the human religious logic that assumes God accepts the worship initiative if their intention is good. So it's not based on the intention. In the Levitical system, the validity of the act depends exclusively on its own conformity to the revealed command. So God does not adapt to human approach. The human must align with God's order. What a privilege we have to not being part of the people of Israel, and God through Messiah has extended the invitation for anybody outside the people of Israel to come and be part of his people, to adapt ourselves to his law, not to change his law, not to change sacred space, not to change the temple location, not to change the priesthood, not to change the biblical law, not to change the appointed times and dates, but to conform and adapt to what God has established. This is very important for us because otherwise we are doing the same mistake that Nadab and Abihu did. And remember, they were consecrated, they were closer to God, so they had major responsibility with God. We, strangers from the nations, have been invited by mercy. We have a great responsibility to uphold and to adapt to God's command. Let's continue here. Uh, the fire of the altar versus strange fire. Sorry, this is still in Spanish. It didn't translate. The distinction between the authorized fire, continuous common sacred, and HSRI, strange uncommon, is the central interpretive essence of the incident in Leviticus 10. It is not an accident. It is not a distinction of degree, but judiciary category: valid versus invalid, sanction versus usurp. Were they under the influence of wine? It's a it's something that sometimes people it's a position that some people have. It says the provision of wine, Leviticus 10:8 to 12, which follow immediately after the account of Nadab and Abihu, has been interpreted by some as indicating that the priest acted under the influence. However, the legal analysis of the text suggests that this reading through ancient is secondary. Thought ancient is secondary. The provision of wine may constitute preventive norm derived from the incident, not a casual explanation of it. The narrative of Leviticus 10:1 formulates the transgression in the terms of unauthorized action with no reference to an altered mental state. So the principle of Leviticus 10:3 in the biblical canon. Sinai, Exodus 19, strict boundaries around the mountain. The people may not ascend on the penalty of death. Unauthorized proximity to the divine space is already constitutionally dangerous here. Leviticus 10, the Nadab and Abihu, foundation paradigm. Transgression of the protocol in the most holy space generates immediate judgment. It established the jurisprudence of the priestly system. 2 Samuel 6, Uzzah. Uzzah touched the ark of the covenant to steady it and dies. Protective intent does not mitigate the transgression of unauthorized contact with the holy. This is very important for us. It's an example for us. Protective intent, the best intent, we can apply here that his intention of his heart was the best, although it does not mitigate that it is a transgression of unauthorized contact with the holy. So it does not justify that he tried to touch the ark. It does not justify that he is not authorized. Remember that they were supposed to carry the ark in a certain manner. They were supposed to do, they were already doing stuff that were wrong that led to this, but it does not justify the intention of Uzzah, which I believe it was the best intention. It does not justify the commandment that established that he is not authorized to touch the ark. Acts chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira. In the apostolic community, the valuation of trust before the Holy Spirit. So they try to keep some of the money that they have stored, their inheritance. Hebrew 12, 28 to 39. Our God is a consuming fire. The author of Hebrew directly cites Deuteronomy 4:24 to confirm the principle of holiness as a category of ontological risk, does not disappear in the new covenant. Deuteronomy 12, the prohibition against adding or subtracting. We already read about this. I'm going to read the notes here. Legal connection with staff. The Deuteronomy mandate of not adding or subtracting is explicit formulation of the same principle underlying staff, as Leviticus 10. Unauthorized innovation is not religious creativity. It's form of legislative usurpation before God as sovereign lawgiver. The principle receives systematic development in rabbinical tradition and constitutes one of the hermeneutical pillars of halachic law. The provision of unauthorized innovation in the written Torah becomes a central normative category in rabbinical Judaism. So the cycle of vindication of holiness, revealed mandates. God established the normative pattern of worship, tafnid. That's why it's very important for us to understand the temple. The temple is going to show us how to approach God. The temple is going to show us what's the pattern of worship God has established. Actually, the Amidah or the service that is done in the synagogue is it actually comes from the Tafnid. It comes from the pattern that was established in the temple, adapted to the synagogues. It does not replace the temple. It only functions as a way for us to remember and continue what was done in the temple in certain point until the temple is restored. It's rebuilt again. So the God established the normative pattern of worship in the Tafnit, Exodus 25, verse 8 and 9. Priestly approach. The cultic agent Korah entered the sacred jurisdiction and space. Conformity or transgression. The act is evaluated objectively according to its correspondence with the mandate. Vindication of holiness. God manifests himself as holy, acceptance or judgment, kavod before the people. So God manifests based on the conformity or the transgression, if they are doing it according to the commandment, if they are doing it according to the mandate of the what is the pattern of worship, if they are the priestly authorized to come near to God, then it's vindication of holiness. God is going to manifest himself as holy. It's going to accept, as in chapter 9, the last verses, or there's going to be judgment. But God's holiness and his glory is going to be manifest no matter what. SAF as a cultic constitution. SAF is not simply a set apart a set of ritual instruction. It is the cultic constitution of the sanctuary. Like any legal constitution, it defines the framework of assets. Very important. Follow me on this one. It's going to establish the framework of assets. It's going to establish binding procedure. Remember, something that is binding is law. It's legal. So it has to be done the way that it has been established. It's going to delimit the responsibility of each agent. So nobody can do something based on the intention of his heart. He's going to follow what is being delimited already. Set the limits of the system and determine the consequence of transgression. So Nadab and Abihu, they knew that if they deviate from the system, the consequence was going to be death because they were supposed to bear the iniquity. Its authority is supreme and cannot be abrogated by human initiative. Only God can change because when we study law, only the lawgiver, in this case, God, the sovereign, can alter the law. And obviously, he's not going to change the law because he made a pact with Aaron and his son forever, an everlasting pact with them. So, constitutional structure on SAF. Regulated assets define who may enter the sacred space, under what condition, and with what level of authorization. Access is neither universal nor discretionary. Binding procedure establish the exact order of each cultic action. There is no room for improvisation or substitution of element within the commanded protocol. System boundary delimit the space, material, roles, and time of worship. Any action outside this limit is sarah. So somebody changing the calendar, somebody changing the times that we come before God, it's considered sarah, foreign to the sacred legal system. So it becomes something foreign to the legal system established by God. We have to be very careful. I think so. We have to consider our ways and what we are doing, how we approach God. We cannot change the laws established by God. We cannot change if God gave authority to Aaron and his sons, priests forever. We cannot change the priesthood. We cannot change the Levite rules. We cannot change the Sanhedrin rules. If God gave authority for them to establish the calendars, why do we have to change? If we do that, we are making an action outside these limits, the rules and the time of worship established by God. Therefore, it's considered Sarah. It's foreign to the sacred legal system. And the penalty for this is like we see the example of Abihu, Nadab and Abihu, death. Consequence of transgression. The system includes mechanisms of response to violation. The death of Nadab and Abihu is the paradigmatic legal sanction of self-constitutional system. Academic legal perspective, key to studying the ancient Near. What self is not? It's not a text religious emotion. It's not guide to subjective devotion. It's not moral legislation in the modern sense. It's not optional or merely advisory. What SAF is, or what's the law inside the portion of SAF? It's a binding ritual order with constitutional force. Definition of divine jurisdiction over sacred space. So God has divine jurisdiction over what is sacred space, and he has delegated Aaron and his sons to be the agents to maintain the sacred space in order. He has delegated over the Sanhedrin so they can maintain sacred space in order. But that being said, calendar, since it's part of sacred space, they have to establish and they have to declare when the calendar starts and when does it end. And then it's ratified by the offerings and the priestly in the inside the tabernacle. They put the offerings on the altar, and therefore the new month starts. So nobody can change that because the jurisdiction is going to fall inside what is divine. Framework of ontological risks for cultic agents, system that operates with objective legal logic, not subjective. So technical conclusion, the death of Nadab and Abihu. They operated within the sacred system. They did not act outside the sanctuary or in profane context. Their transgression occurred within the most restricted space in the biblical universe, the tabernacle itself before God, without legal conformity to divine command. The action lacked normative authorization. There was no prior command authorizing the use of that fire. The absence of command is not a neutral void, it's the basics of the legal transgression. Violation of divine jurisdiction. It was not a minor liturgical error or a misguided excess of zeal. It was a formal violation of divine jurisdiction on a cultic illegality at the highest degree of the biblical holiness. So if the consequence for their violation inside the sacred space, remember, they were consecrated, they were separated for that specific role, and they assume the responsibility. How much we that have come from the nations and have been inherited into the people of Israel, if we try to change what God has established. Here is the bibliography sources that have been cited throughout this study. I hope you can look them up, study them, consider them, and let's return to the commandment. Let's study the command. Let's study what the Bible tells us. This is the phrase that I want to finish with. Saf is not what is right. What is right is not what seems good, but what has been commanded. What is probably right for us is not what is good. What for us seems to be right is not what is good. What is good is what has been commanded, what God has established us in the Torah. The commandments are the heart of God. Remember that in ancient Near East, the gods never revealed what they wanted and how the people could maintain the blessings from the God. The God of Israel has told us what he wants, how we can approach him, how we can be inside his sacred space, who can be closer, who can be at the mid-range, and who can be a little bit further, but inside that sacred space in order to maintain order. God has called Israel to be an example to the nations. of God's holiness, of God's how good God is, how merciful He has been, and that His mercy continues forever. How do we present, how do we honor God in public, that the nation may know that He's a good God, that He is His justice, that He's just and He's merciful? The formulation summarizes the central juridical theological principle of self-worship, and the incident of Leviticus 10. Cultic validity does not depend on the subject's subjective perception, but on objective conformity to reveal divine command. It is the indispensable hermeneutical basic for any responsible interpretation of the biblical priestly system. So, what have we learned throughout this study? What can we take out from this study? That our submission to the command is going to determine the validity of what we do. It's going to present the God we serve. So what is to us might seem right, it doesn't mean it's good. But what God has commanded for us to do, that's good. It's going to allow us to come near to God and allow us to stay within the parameters of obedience and not allow us to usurp what He has established. I hope this teaching be a blessing to you. And if it is a blessing, consider sharing with others this blessing on your social media. And and I hope that we can consider our ways. We can consider the commandments and studying them in order for us to become better servants of God. That we can consider the study of God's temple, understanding that that should be the example for us to follow. What is holy, what's not holy, how we approach to God, when do we approach to God, who have the legal authority to do certain stuff and who doesn't have it, so that we may understand the heart of God and what He really wants us to be. Consider understanding what's your role, your function, and your purpose inside the kingdom, so that the kingdom of God may grow and the honor of God and His name may be made a great name across every nation, that everybody may know that the God of Israel is a just God, that my King is a good King, that He wants the best for you if you submit to Him, to His commandments in obedience. Shabbat Shalom.